development team at Qualcomm. I'd like to use this slot today to talk to you a bit more about Auracast broadcast audio. I have to admit I don't have the most technical presentation today, but instead I'd like to focus on where Auracast is today in terms of specification development, where are we in terms of devices in the market, and I'd like to go into a bit more detail on how would you go about implementing your own Auracast system if that's something that you find interesting. So before I get too far ahead of myself, let me do a quick introduction on Auracast. I'm sure everybody in the room knows what Bluetooth is. It seems like a silly question, right? It's an incredibly well-known technology. I think it enjoys 92% brand recognition. It's pretty incredible. The first time in my life that I listened to wireless music, Bluetooth. The first time I placed a hands-free phone call, Bluetooth. And we have an incredibly strong association between Bluetooth and these traditional use cases. So much so that when the SIG introduced ALI Audio in 2022, I think many people still focused on these traditional use cases. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what people may not have realized is that ALI Audio brings with it extended features that enable us to do broadcast use cases as well as shared audio use cases. And this broadcast technology is called Auracast. So it would be wrong to say that Auracast stands apart from ALI Audio. In truth, Auracast and Unicast are two pieces of the same puzzle. So I think I'm going to cheat for a minute. I'm going to show you a video prepared by the SIG that should set the scene quite nicely for us to discuss a few Auracast use cases.
Bluetooth introduced the world to wireless audio, a better way to call, listen, and watch. It's part of the fabric of our lives, making us safer, more productive, more joyful. Now, Bluetooth will bring us even closer.
Spin your wheel.
To each other and our world, augmenting our reality through audio broadcasting. Introducing Auracast. With Auracast, you can invite others to share in your audio experiences. You can unmute what was once silent. And you can hear your best wherever you go. Auracast Broadcast Audio. A new energy for audio. A new energy for life.
Nice. Apologies for the buffering. It's always a risk when you play videos in these things, isn't it? So in the first slide, I explained how Auracast is in fact part of ALI Audio. So why then does this technology have its own name? Well, the reason is pretty simple. Many of the use cases that you just saw are big, exciting, scalable use cases that happen in public spaces. So think about concert halls, even venues such as this one. And having a well-known public brand is a very efficient way to communicate to people that a technology is available. I don't want to do free marketing for Wi-Fi. I don't think they need it. But I'm old enough to remember a time when I walked into a coffee shop and I had to ask the barista, what does Wi-Fi here mean? And 20 years later, we don't even ask that question anymore. And to put it simply, we want the same experience for Auracast. We want somebody to get into a taxi or arrive at a public venue, and we want them to immediately understand that Auracast technology is available to them. And in time, if we as developers and the implementers out in the market, if we do this well enough, we hope to deliver the same seamless user experience. So we want people to identify the brand, and we want them to immediately know what is available to them and also how to use it. So let's talk a bit more about use cases. And I'm going to start with the bottom one, assistive hearing. This includes people who make use of hearing aids and similar devices. I think they've already benefited from the introduction of Bluetooth to many of these device types, and Auracast will enhance this experience further. I will say this, I'm not affiliated with the hearing aid workgroup within the SIG, but I think they deserve a lot of credit for Ali Audio in general. In the very, very early days, they were one of the groups who pushed for a new generation of codecs that provided higher throughput, lower power use, and I think they played a key part in setting the ball rolling for what was eventually to become Ali Audio. Silent TV screens is something that you hear quite a lot. It's just for some reason we have a lot of TV screens around us these days. They are in exercise bikes at the gym. They are at the breakfast area of the hotel, airports, bars, that sort of thing. With Auracast technology, you should be able to tune into the audio from that device using your own personal Bluetooth earbuds or headset, even speakers if the use case permits. And then finally, I'll mention multi-language support. This is a common thread that is woven throughout many Auracast use cases. Just imagine, for example, in this venue today, if we had an Auracast system available, we could broadcast my speech not just in English, but also in German or Mandarin. And this is in part made possible by the fact that Auracast transmission devices have a very, very flexible configuration. They are effectively free to choose the audio content that they want to transmit. Right, alphabet soup, as they call it. On the left-hand side is an image that is a standard Ali Bluetooth stack. At the bottom, you have the controller that lives close to the radio, and as you move up through the link layer, you eventually arrive at the area where profiles and services live. And as many people familiar with Bluetooth will know, that quite often when a new use case is introduced, it's also accompanied by new profiles and services. So on the right-hand side, we try to pick out a few, not all, but a few of the key features that make up Auracast and also Ali Audio, of course. Crucially, at the bottom, you have isochronous channels. This is the transport used for Ali Audio, and it's the same for Auracast. We use broadcast isochronous streams. In the link layer, you have my personal favorite. There's a feature called periodic advertising sync transfer, PAST. And in simple terms, it allows one device that has already attained sync to a periodic train to share information with a connected device so that that device can simply connect to the same train without scanning from the get-go. So it saves time, it saves energy, and when I talk about the broadcast assistant in a few slides' time, I think you'll see why that's valuable. And then at the top, you have a collection of profiles and services. And to drive home the point that Auracast is in fact a part of Ali Audio, I will say that many of these are common for Auracast and Ali Audio. Things like basic audio profile, published audio capabilities, these are all shared. Same specification document implements Ali Audio as well as Auracast. Of course, a few of them are specific to broadcast. We have public broadcast profile and broadcast audio scan service. Again, these are specific to broadcast, but that's a good sign. It means that it's a feature that's doing well. And if these profiles represent the first and second waves of profiles and services, watch this space. There are more profiles and services to come in the near future. So let me try to take all this information into the real world. Where are we today with Auracast? Well, before you can put anything into the market, of course, you need to have the specifications ready, as we are reminded very, very often as software developers. In 2019, the SIG announced the arrival of isochronous channels. And as you saw on the previous slide, that's a key element in the world of Ali Audio. 2021, 2022, the SIG announced Ali Audio, and that collection of Ali profiles and services were complete at that time. So as far as specifications go, we are in a good place. I believe the first handset that supported Ali Audio hit the market around about 2022. It may be early 2023, but more or less in that time frame. But of course, if we are talking about broadcast systems, you have to think about more than just phones. You also have to think about the sync devices, the peripherals, headsets, earbuds, those sorts of things. And because we are talking broadcast, in some use cases, you also have an element of public infrastructure that's needed. Not all, but if you think about a movie theater or a cinema or a concert hall or an airport, there is an element of an Auracast deployment that needs to happen before users can enjoy Auracast experience in those venues. So today in 2024, I don't think it's very hard to find a phone that supports ALI audio and indeed Auracast. I would say the same for peripheral devices. If you look carefully, you can find them out there. And as we head towards 2027, I think it will be hard to find one that doesn't support ALI audio. But what about this public infrastructure element? Well, the 2024 market report, I think, have scaled that number upwards to 2.5 million, but the expectation is that by the end of the decade, there should be 2.5 million deployments for Auracast. Now, in the world of Bluetooth shipment numbers, that doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine 2 million movie cinemas, and that puts things into perspective. And that process has started more or less today. There are companies out there who manufacture source devices of all shapes and sizes, and they are starting to find their way into these public venues. I'll say 2 more things about source devices because I don't want to scare people that the technology is not available yet. Not all use cases require public hardware to make use of Auracast use cases. You could have an Auracast source in your television, your phone, your laptop. But yes, for public venues like airports and the like, there will be some work needed. And secondly, I would say that source devices don't have to be big, complicated, power-hungry devices. In my hand, I have a little reference design, a little USB power device. This is an Auracast source. You can plug this into your laptop computer or your phone, and there you go. In favorable conditions, you can get up to 80 or 100 meters, even with a little device like this. So if you have a coffee shop or anything like that, you may not need much more than this to implement your Auracast infrastructure. So what makes up an Auracast system? These roles are from the basic audio profile, the BAP document I mentioned earlier, if you were wondering. But I like the naming. They talk of a broadcast source, a sync, and a broadcast assistant. Now, Auracast is still an audio system, so I think everybody would guess that you would have a source and a sync. But the broadcast assistant may be slightly new for Auracast, and I'll get to that in a bit more detail towards the end. So let's focus on the source and the sync. Before I forget, I will say that if you are concerned about security, don't be. The Auracast source may choose to encrypt the audio stream. Of course, it requires the sync to obtain a broadcast key. Usually this is delivered out of band, but we've become pretty good at doing that these days. We have QR codes and things like that. Or in the future, you could have an assistant help you with that as well. You don't have to encrypt the audio content. If in your use case, it makes sense for you to leave the broadcast open, not a problem at all. In fact, it makes things a little bit easier. So if you were to implement a broadcast source, you have to essentially configure your Bluetooth device to do 2 things at the same time. Obviously, the first thing is that you have to send audio content. This is packaged in what we call a broadcast isochronous group. And inside of the group, you can have many broadcast isochronous streams. Okay. If you have a simple use case, you may only need 1 stream with combined left and right audio. But think about the example of us translating my presentation in this room. If you have 4 languages, you could easily have 4 or 8 streams. And it just scales up beyond that. But at the same time, you also have to transmit information that describes your audio content, using a periodic train that Victor described so nicely in the previous presentation. And in this periodic train, you essentially put metadata that allows any potential sync device to identify that your broadcast is present. And it also assists that sync device to work out if it can actually render the audio. Does it support the codec? Does it have the broadcast code? Can it decrypt the data? Is the audio location correct? You don't want left English on an earbud if you want really looking for right Mandarin. It wouldn't be very nice. The sync, as I've just explained, is the other side of the coin to this equation. Because we have these 2 pieces of information being broadcast by the source device, the sync has 2 steps to follow before it can render audio to the user. In the first instance, it needs to synchronize with the periodic train. It needs to find the metadata that describes the audio, and that allows the sync device to work out, can I actually play this to the user? And once the answer to that question is yes, the sync device will continue to actually sync to the audio stream and play the audio to the end user. Now, that two-step sequence I just described is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the sync device doing that. But on small form factor devices like earbuds and hearing aids, that approach has 2 challenges. The first one is battery life. If you're expecting a small device with a small battery to leave the Bluetooth receiver on for long periods of time, it could have a negative impact on your battery life, and we don't want that for users. The other challenge is a practical one. If you walk into a museum and there are 20 broadcast sources being active at the same time, how do you choose the one you're interested in if the only user interface you have is a tiny trackpad and an earbud? Now again, it's not impossible. It can be done, but it's not quite the seamless user experience that people want for Auracast. Which brings me nicely to the assistant. And the assistant will help in the following ways. In simple terms, an Auracast assistant device takes on the duty of scanning for periodic trains so it can find the presence of broadcast sources. It's that simple. The earbud says to a device with a bigger battery, hey, I don't want to scan for a long time, can you do this for me? Other qualities of the broadcast assistant is that it must have a LE link to the sync device for 2 reasons. One, if it has a link, it can check what the audio capabilities are of the sync so that it doesn't recommend audio content that's not supported. There's no point in asking a sync to render audio if it doesn't support the codec. And the assistant can help even at that stage. And then second reason for the link is my favorite, the pass procedure. This is where the pass procedure is used. The assistant can sync to the train, and it basically takes the load away from the sync device. The sync device doesn't have to find the train again. It can simply use the pass procedure, latch onto the data, and take it from there. Now, for the second problem of user interface, I suspect in most cases the broadcast assistant will have a rich user interface, and you can probably guess what device will take on that role in the future. Now, it doesn't have to be a phone. There are situations where you can combine the source and the assistant into one device. So it's a very efficient system. Each rectangle on this slide effectively represents a piece of hardware. Think about your TV screen. Your TV has a display. It has a big user interface. It's mains powered. It doesn't suffer from the same problems that, say, an earbud does. So in these cases, the source and the assistant can be on the same hardware device. But for public venues, I think this will be a very common topology where your phone all of a sudden becomes a participant in the Auracast ecosystem. And for example, if we had an Auracast system today, you could walk into the venue, you could take out your phone, and you could say, well, I would like to listen to this presentation in German or Mandarin or whatever the case may be. And it's that simple. Now, this is not something that's far, far away. I think there are already 2 phones, maybe 3 on the market today with native operating system support for acting as an Auracast assistant in the system. Right, so this is not a marketing presentation, and I want to be respectful of that, so let me change the message slightly. If you find Auracast to be an intriguing technology, there are devices on the market today that will help you to do this. There's no longer any need to wait. I think the market is ready for Auracast development to take off. And then this is my final slide. I guess the final question you may have is, does it work? Well, luckily for me, the answer in this case is yes, it does. Throughout 2023, the Bluetooth SIG have taken Auracast on the road. They have an exhibit called the Auracast Experience that they had at the Mobile World Congress and at Computex and a few other events. Unfortunately, that presentation is not here this week, but keep an eye out for it and also check out the website. I think there's a lot of interesting videos on that. And then my final piece of evidence to suggest that it works. In this picture, we show a man called Mr. Dino Beckes. He is one of my bosses at Qualcomm. And at the Snapdragon Summit last year, which is a very, very big event for our company, not to be messed with, we installed Auracast transmitter devices. And for a few of our voice and music presentations, we translated the speech into Mandarin for a few of the guests. And I think we had 60 guests use reference design earbuds like the ones in my hand to tune into the presentation in Mandarin. No problems, excellent range, and we used transmitter devices not much bigger than the one I have here. So I think that's everything that I will say today on Auracast. Thank you very much for listening. Please take away the thought that Auracast is with us. Keep an eye out for the logo. I'm sure you'll be able to see that in public spaces in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.